Robert?
I've got a whole table of people who want to read through it before we give you any big breaking headlines. So, Chuck, just talk to me about the complexity here. Go broad lines as Lisa and Andrew read through this.
I will buy them some time because,
thank you very much.
Because they are smarter than me and ought to be reading it and discussing it first with you. But the complexities, right? So you had laid it out nicely at the beginning, Katie, the various scenarios: full immunity, no immunity, or something in between where a president gets immunity for official acts.
So let me share what's happening on Capitol Hill regarding impeachment. This is uncharted territory for the American political scene. It's not just about people demanding impeachment. That happens quite often in heated times. What stands out is that on December 11th, 2025, a whopping 140 members of the House of Representatives officially voted to advance articles of impeachment against Trump. This wasn't just casual chatter in a party meeting or a public statement. It was a formal recorded vote that's now part of the House clerk's permanent record.
All right, let's get you more news from Donald Trump. Well, the American president is now facing calls to be impeached after he drew criticism with a fiery message on Iran. Trump has continued his polarizing rhetoric on Easter Sunday, delivering an expletive-laden attack on Iran that sparked criticism on Capitol Hill and beyond. Trump renewed his threat to unleash heavy bombing on Iranian power plants and bridges if Tehran refused to unblock the strategic Strait of Hormuz.
140 members putting their names on an official record is no small feat. This isn't a casual petition or a flashy press release. It's a significant congressional vote that speaks volumes about the urgency they feel right now.
Tomorrow, the House will vote to give the Vice President Mike Pence 24 hours to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. If the Vice President doesn't play ball, the House will vote on the impeachment resolution on Wednesday at the earliest. A vote would need a simple majority, and with the Democrats in charge, that is almost a certainty. At that point, things get more complicated. Option one is that the House tells the Senate to start a trial immediately, but it's unlikely with just 9 days left until a new president is inaugurated.
That's a whole other ballgame. Today, I'm diving into what the December vote actually means, what the history behind the impeachment resolutions against Trump shows, and what it would take for the loud calls for impeachment to actually lead to formal proceedings in the House. And speaking of numbers, small business optimism just hit a record high with an incredible 41-point jump in just 1 month. The House is making it clear that members need to maintain quorum and stop any disruptions. They're not playing around here. Anyone breaching the quorum could find themselves facing some serious consequences.
And won counties in our country, 2,700 to 525, on a map that reads almost completely red for Republican.
Now let's break down that vote from December 11th, 2021, which I think is getting overlooked. Representative Al Green has been relentless about pushing for impeachment, even when leadership would rather not hear it. He's brought forth resolutions even when some thought the timing was off, or when more senior members were doing their best to keep impeachment off the table. That day, he made everyone take a stand with a vote on H.R. 939, which forced members of Congress to go on the record regarding whether they wanted to set that resolution aside without any discussion. It's essentially a way to bury something quietly instead of actually debating it.
We have a one-vote margin now, smallest in history, right? So for a big chunk of the first 100 days of the Congress and perhaps beyond, this is not an easy task, but we're going to get it done. We have the most aggressive, important legislative agenda that we've had certainly in my lifetime, I think. And when we get this done, it will be an extraordinary achievement because the vote's margin is so small.
Now, when it comes to the recent vote about impeachment, there were actually 140 Democrats who stood against the motion to put the resolution aside. They were essentially saying, hey, this matters. Let's not just forget about it. Let's give it some thought. However, the motion to table it still passed with a vote of 237 to 140, which means both Republicans and about 24 Democrats decided to bury the resolution. That being said, having 140 members cast their votes in support of moving forward with impeachment articles against Trump is a big deal. It shows a clear, documented stance from a substantial chunk of the House Democrats. Now, this December vote really highlights the divide within the Democratic Party. You've got the progressives pushing for immediate action on impeachment, while the party leadership is focused on controlling the timing and strategy. This tension is one of the biggest internal issues facing the Democrats right now. The members who oppose tabling the motion mostly come from the progressive wing, representing safe Democratic districts where taking a stand on impeachment isn't as risky for them. They feel strongly that the evidence against Trump calls for holding him accountable. On the flip side, the party leadership that voted to table or did nothing to stop the motion has a different approach. They're considering their competitive districts and pondering whether a lengthy impeachment process with no realistic chance of Senate conviction might actually rally the Republican base more than it does for Democrats. They're also weighing whether it would be more effective for the party to focus its energy on the upcoming 2026 midterms through oversight investigations, rather than another impeachment that could just end in a not guilty. Both points of view are valid. They illustrate the different thoughts on strategy and risk that exist within the party. It's really interesting to think about how the ongoing conversation around accountability is intertwined with the long-term goals of restraining Trump's behavior and rebuilding Democratic influence. This tension is played out in significant ways, like during the formal floor votes, such as the one on December 11th, which tells us a lot about the internal dynamics of Congress right now. If we look back at the long history of impeachment resolutions aimed at Trump, it reveals quite a bit that those casually following the Trump era might miss. It's honestly hard to believe how many times articles of impeachment have been formally introduced against him throughout his political journey. We've seen numerous resolutions that cover issues like abuse of power, obstruction of Congress, and violations of the Emoluments Clause. This includes his actions concerning Ukraine during the first impeachment and his conduct related to January 6th during the second impeachment. There were also matters tied to war powers regarding Iran, the Epstein documents, misconduct in the cabinet, and defiance of court orders. It's a long list, showing that at least some members of Congress have consistently felt that Trump has crossed constitutional lines that impeachment is meant to tackle. This ongoing pattern of formal resolutions being introduced across a range of issues and over several years is what some have called an impeachment frenzy, which really stands out in the history of how American presidents have been held accountable. Now let's take a closer look at the significance of those 140 votes against tabling the impeachment resolution. It's more crucial than it may seem at first glance. In a House with 435 members, 140 votes account for about 32% of the chamber. What makes this even more interesting is that these votes came without any direction from Democratic leadership. Instead, they were based solely on individual members' judgments about whether this particular impeachment resolution should move forward or be dismissed. The number of members willing to take a stand and vote that way, even without leadership pushing them, really speaks volumes. It's honestly hard to believe that more than a third of the House is ready to push for new articles of impeachment, even if it goes against what their party leaders would prefer. This really shows where the Democratic caucus stands on the issue. That doesn't mean they're guaranteed to succeed in an impeachment vote, especially since Republicans hold the majority in the House and manage to pass a tabling motion. However, having 140 members on record as willing to take action is a significant marker. This could come into play when political circumstances shift, like if Democrats regain the majority in the House come 2026, allowing them to push for a floor vote without needing Republican support. Now let's take a look at why Trump has faced impeachment twice before and how that history influences the current calls for impeachment. Context is essential to understand the current discussions and their limits. The initial impeachment centered around the Ukraine call turned out to be a highly partisan event and ultimately led to Trump's acquittal in the Senate. That move didn't change his standing with his supporters much. The second impeachment, following the events of January 6th, was the most bipartisan ever, with 10 Republican votes in the House and 7 in the Senate for a conviction. Yet again, it ended in an acquittal. These two events have created specific expectations and calculations on how people view the possibility of a third impeachment. Democrats pushing for immediate action believe that accountability must drive decisions even if they don't achieve removal. They feel that the act of impeaching recording conduct through such a serious constitutional process holds significance even when getting a conviction seems unlikely in today's political landscape. On the other hand, those who are more cautious about another impeachment think that it could set a precedent, normalizing another acquittal and possibly protecting Trump politically. They argue that this could waste political capital that might be better used elsewhere. Both sides are making serious points, and neither viewpoint is obviously right or wrong. What the December vote shows is that a substantial group of House Democrats is firmly leaning towards the idea that taking action is necessary no matter the potential outcomes. The pressure on leadership is really building, no matter their desire to act. Let's dive into what's fueling all these impeachment calls. The vote back in December 2025 didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was set against a backdrop of ongoing events during Trump's second term that I've been discussing. There was the Iran war powers issue, where Trump bandied about the idea of military action against Iran without congressional go-ahead, which had some folks claiming we were facing a serious constitutional crisis. Then there was the tussle over the Epstein documents, where impeachment articles targeted Attorney General Pam Bondi for allegedly sitting on documents that, under a bipartisan transparency law, were supposed to be made public. Then we can't overlook the pattern of ignoring court orders, especially in immigration cases, which made a federal judge threaten criminal contempt for high-ranking officials. And let's not forget the impeachment resolutions aimed at cabinet members Noam Hexeth and Kennedy. All these instances contributed to an environment where 140 members felt ready to vote against putting the impeachment resolution aside in December. The push for impeachment isn't about one standout incident. It stems from a whole range of behavior throughout Trump's second term that many House Democrats believe is serious enough to demand constitutional accountability, regardless of what leadership might be weighing strategically. What's really striking is the urgency that's evident from those calling for impeachment. Typically, impeachment is a slow, methodical process. Think investigations, hearings, collecting evidence, and then finally a vote. However, this time around, people are calling for immediate action, stating that the conduct is clear, documented, and still happening. This sense of urgency definitely reflects a tactical decision, since every week that goes by without any movement feels like wasted time. It seems like there's a lot of chatter going on about the need for impeachment, and honestly, the ongoing conduct is raising some eyebrows. Each month that goes by without taking any steps for impeachment feels like it's giving the administration a free pass to operate with unchecked authority. Those calling for immediate action think that dragging things out in the usual political way actually makes the situation worse. When accountability feels slow and sluggish, it might come off as though the behavior in question is somehow okay, or at least up for debate, instead of being something that should definitely be addressed with serious constitutional consequences. Now, thinking about what it really takes for all this talk about impeachment to actually lead to a vote, and maybe even a successful impeachment, we've got a few important hurdles to clear. First off, there needs to be a Democratic majority in the House right now, with Republicans in control. Any effort to bring up impeachment resolutions is likely to be squashed, no matter how many Democrats oppose tabling the motions. For there to be a floor vote, either we'd need quite a few Republicans to switch sides, which just isn't happening, or we'd have to wait for the midterms in 2026 to shake things up. The next thing we need to consider is whether the Democratic leaders are willing to actually schedule a vote. Even if they do achieve a majority, the leadership decides what goes on the agenda, and they might prioritize oversight and investigation over diving into formal impeachment articles. Getting past their cautious approach would require a shift in how they think about their strategy, or enough pressure from the more progressive members to make them act. Finally, the specific actions that are driving the calls for impeachment need to be well documented and obviously impeachable to motivate leadership into action. The behaviors being talked about, such as war powers violations and obstructing documents related to Epstein, are serious issues. But whether they're compelling enough to push leaders to move forward is still a big question mark. So, there's been some serious talk about impeachment lately. There are 140 members of the House who really want to push for it, and they're making their voices heard, trying to keep the pressure on. This brings up an interesting point about impeachment here. It used to be this rare thing, reserved for only the most serious cases of presidential misconduct. But now we're seeing it turn into something that's almost routine in the political toolbox. When the framers of the Constitution set up impeachment, they envisioned it as a safeguard for when a president really overstepped their bounds, used only in those extreme situations where removal was absolutely necessary. But we've already seen 3 impeachment inquiries involving Trump, with 2 led to acquittals and a potential third brewing based on the numbers coming out of the House votes. What we're witnessing is a shift from impeachment being this exceptional remedy to it becoming more like a regular way to hold politicians accountable, especially when a good chunk of the opposition party thinks it's warranted. Now, whether this change is a smart response to our current political landscape or if it's just watering down what impeachment means is a hot topic of debate. But the vote from December 2025 paints a clear picture. It shows that there's real backing for this. 140 House members officially recorded their stance, showing they're ready to move forward with impeachment articles. This isn't just some survey or casual comment. It's a real roll call vote tied to an official resolution, names included. So, more than a third of the House is saying they're ready to act if the political climate shifts, especially if the Democrats regain control in the 2026 elections. The discussion around impeachment has shifted from being just an idea to something that the House is seriously considering. It's interesting to see how progressive members are pushing for immediate action while the leadership is taking a more cautious approach. This isn't just about different ideologies. There are real debates happening about the best strategy for accountability. Both sides have solid points to make. Some argue that we need to act quickly since the conduct in question is ongoing, while others caution that a third acquittal could normalize the situation, wasting political resources that could be better spent elsewhere. How this internal debate resolves could really shape what a hypothetical Democratic majority in 2027 might do with impeachment powers. It's helpful to see this as a strategic discussion rather than just a conflict between radicals and moderates, as it gives a clearer view of what's being contested within the Democratic caucus. Another point of note is how impeachment has become a more regular tool for political accountability. Regardless of where you stand on Trump, it's clear that impeachment has shifted from being a rare safeguard to something that many House members feel comfortable using when they believe the conduct is serious enough. This change has important implications for how impeachment is viewed by the public and what weight it carries constitutionally. There's a real debate over whether this shift is good or bad for democratic accountability, but the frequency of votes and formal resolutions shows that this transformation is real. Lastly, there's a sense of urgency among those pushing for action before the weekend, reflecting a deeper belief that slow accountability might actually enable the very conduct that needs addressing. Those advocating for quick action are really making a point about what a delayed constitutional response communicates. If ongoing conduct is left unresolved, it might suggest that it's acceptable rather than demanding a serious remedy. Whether you agree with this viewpoint or not, it's a substantial constitutional argument that should be considered seriously instead of brushed off as simply impatient or naive. Capitol Hill is really feeling the heat over impeachment these days, and it's more than just political drama. It's a real clash about what the Constitution requires amid the complicated political realities we find ourselves in. If we take a step back, we can see that the current situation around impeachment is pretty significant for understanding the direction of American democracy. When the framers put together the impeachment process, they had some key ideas in mind. They believed the Senate was supposed to be a thoughtful body, insulated from the whims of public opinion, providing a check on the House's decisions. The idea was that the Senate would sift through any partisan motivations and only back up impeachment when there was truly extraordinary misconduct at play. However, that plan falls apart when you look at just how divided our politics have become, with Senate votes often sticking to party lines. Just think about it. In the second impeachment of Trump, for instance, 43 Republican senators could just shut down any chance of conviction, no matter the evidence presented. Instead of thoughtful statesmanship, we ended up with partisan protection, turning impeachment into more of a symbolic act rather than a meaningful one with real consequences. Now, when Congress members decided to go through with the impeachment resolution in December 2025, they weren't really trying to remove anyone. Instead, they wanted to make a statement, to create an official record highlighting their belief that certain actions crossed a constitutional line. They figured that even if the traditional machinery of impeachment wasn't going to work as intended, they could still make their point about accountability. The real question we're left with is whether this new, more expressive use of impeachment actually helps democratic accountability or if it weakens the process by disconnecting it from any tangible outcomes. This is a debate that's going to stick around for as long as our political environment stays as charged as it is. And speaking of the future, we need to consider the ripple effects the 2026 midterms might have on the impeachment landscape and why there's some serious internal discussion happening within the Democratic Party about it. If voters decide to shift control of the House, things are really going to heat up. Right now, some Democratic members are voting against setting aside impeachment resolutions, but they're doing it more out of hope than practicality. They're expressing a stance that can only turn into action if they have the majority needed to actually bring impeachment articles to a floor vote. Looking ahead to the midterms in 2026, if the Democrats regain a majority and if Trump's popularity drops due to a string of controversies, then that hope might actually become a plausible reality. Once that happens, the whole discussion about impeachment shifts from theory to something that the leadership has to face head on. If there's a Democratic speaker in charge, they'll have to decide if they want to move forward with impeachment articles or focus on oversight and investigations without going down that road. With 140 members already on record as ready to support advancing impeachment, that speaker is going to feel some serious pressure. The argument that another impeachment without a Senate conviction would be counterproductive is really going to be put to the test as well. Those demands, which sound all theoretical right now, will turn into immediate action if the majority changes hands. The choices made in such a scenario will help define the significance of a potential third impeachment of Trump in the history of accountability during this time. As I reflect on the situation on Capitol Hill regarding impeachment, it really highlights something about accountability in a constitution that's under extreme political pressure. The tools for action are there, and the threshold for taking them has arguably been crossed multiple times with clear evidence of wrongdoing. Those who believe action is necessary have made their voices heard through official votes. Yet we face significant hurdles, like partisanship in the Senate and the absence of a House majority, that hold back these mechanisms from working as they're supposed to. This disconnect between the strong belief that accountability demands action and the structural barriers preventing that action is really the crux of the current constitutional crisis. It's what led to those 140 recorded votes. Impeachment is really heating up on Capitol Hill, and the intensity surrounding it isn't just noise, it's rooted in some serious constitutional worries. This whole situation is pointing to a specific issue caused by the extreme divide in our political landscape, which is messing with how we hold leaders accountable. The ongoing push against setting aside an impeachment resolution is a clear sign of that. It's important to look at this for what it really is, instead of brushing it off as just political drama. That understanding is key to having an honest conversation about this moment we're in.